The Lamborghini keys hit me square in the chest before I could even raise my hands. Cold metal, sharp edges, and that distinct smell of leather and arrogance. I caught them because 20 years in the Marines teaches you to catch whatever's thrown at you, even when it's thrown by a woman who thinks human beings are furniture. "Park it in the front spot," Olivia Blackwood sneered, not even looking at me. She was too busy checking her reflection in the restaurant's glass doors. "And make sure it's perfectly straight. Last time you parked it crooked." I'm Heath Morrison, 47 years old, and I was standing in the rain wearing a red Valet vest that made me look like a target. But let me back up a bit, because this story doesn't start with me catching keys in a downpour outside the Metropolitan Steakhouse. It starts 20 months earlier, when I had everything, and one stupid moment of principle cost me my life. Morrison's Prime wasn't just a restaurant. It was everything I'd worked for since getting out of the course, $380,000 of my own money, plus every penny from my military retirement and the settlement from when Sarah and I divorced. Prime location on Northwell's grade A beef, staff who'd been with me for years. I had customers who knew my name, suppliers who gave me credit, and a reputation that took 15 years to build. Then I made one mistake. I told a spoiled brat, no. Look, here's the thing about guys like Bryce Blackwood. They're 26 years old and never heard the word no in their lives. Kid rolled up to Morrison's Prime one Friday night in his daddy's Lamborghini, music blasting loud enough to rattle windows 3 blocks away. He wanted to park right in front of the main entrance, blocking the handicapped access. "Sorry, that's illegal," I told him, pointing to the clearly marked signs. "Fire department gets cranky about blocked exits. You can use the valet around the corner." Bryce looked at me like I'd just told him gravity was optional. "Do you know who my mother is?" "Don't care if she's the Pope," I said. "Rules are rules." "Yeah, I know. Should have just moved the cones, let the entitled little prince have his spot, kept my mouth shut. But 20 years of military service teaches you that rules matter, that fairness matters, that you don't bend over backwards for people who never learned respect. That was my first mistake. My second was thinking people like the Blackwoods fight fair. Olivia Blackwood was married to Spencer Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries. Spencer was the type who spoke in corporate buzzwords and wore suits that cost more than most people's cars. But Olivia, she was the real power behind the throne. She didn't get mad, she got strategic. And her idea of strategy was to burn my life to the ground. Started small. Bad Yelp reviews about unprofessional management and hostile service. Anonymous complaints to the Better Business Bureau about discriminatory practices. Then came the health department. The inspector who showed up looked embarrassed to be there. Nice guy, actually. But he had orders from downtown to find violations, and brother, when the city wants to find problems, they find problems. Grease trap that had passed inspection 6 months earlier, suddenly a potential hazard. Walk-in cooler running at 37 degrees instead of 36. Temperature violation. They shut us down for 72 hours. You know what 72 hours means in the restaurant business? It means death. Word spreads faster than wildfire in this industry. Customers don't come back. Suppliers start demanding cash up front. Your weekend reservations cancel, and weekends are what keep you alive. But the real kill shot came 2 weeks later. Our liquor distributor, guy I'd been working with for 8 years, called me up sounding like he was at a funeral. "Heath, I'm sorry, man. Orders from upstairs. We're terminating your account." "What? Why?" "We're current on all payments." I know. Look, between you and me, word came down from Blackwood Industries. They do a lot of business with our parent company. I got no choice. That's when I knew I was screwed. Without liquor, a steakhouse is just an expensive cafeteria. Without customers, you're just a guy with a lot of debt and a building you can't afford. I fought it for 3 months, burned through my savings, borrowed against everything I owned, begged suppliers for credit. But when the Blackwoods want you gone, you're gone. They had connections I couldn't match, lawyers I couldn't afford, and influence I couldn't buy. The foreclosure notice came on a Tuesday morning. I remember because it was trash day, and I sat on my front steps reading the legal papers while garbage trucks rumbled past. Funny thing about hitting rock bottom, everything sounds different, louder, like the world's trying to tell you something. I lost the restaurant, lost my house, lost my truck, had to move into a studio apartment that smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. The kind of place where the previous tenant left mystery stains on the ceiling and the heater only worked when it felt like it. At 45, I was starting over with nothing but a duffel bag full of clothes and a checking account with $847 in it. My ex-wife Sarah tried to be supportive, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise, Heath. Time to try something new. Easy for her to say. She'd moved on, remarried some accountant who wore cardigans and drove a Prius. Our daughter Emma, 19 and away at college, stopped asking for money because she knew I didn't have any to give. That's how a former Marine who once owned the best steakhouse in Chicago ended up wearing a red Valet vest outside the Metropolitan, parking cars for rich people who treated me like I was invisible. But here's what they didn't know. Marines don't quit. We adapt, improvise, overcome, and I was about to overcome the hell out of them. The Metropolitan Steakhouse was everything Morrison's Prime used to be, except bigger, shinier, and owned by people who'd never worked a day in food service. High ceilings, leather everything, and the kind of clientele who thought a $200 steak was reasonable because it came with truffle butter. It was also, unfortunately, where the Blackwood family held court every Friday night like they were royalty visiting the peasants. Getting hired there was easy. Desperate middle-aged guys with bills to pay aren't picky about where the work comes from. Gary, the general manager, looked at my application for about 30 seconds before offering me the job. "You're overqualified," he said, squinting at my resume. "Why you want to park cars?" "Need the work," I told him, which was true. What I didn't mention was that I'd specifically applied there because I knew the Blackwoods ate there every week. Sometimes the best place to hide is right in plain sight. The work sucked. Let me be clear about that. Standing outside in Chicago weather for 10 hours a day, running back and forth to a parking garage 6 blocks away, dealing with people who looked at you like you were part of the furniture. My knees ached from the concrete, my back hurt from all the running, and I went home every night smelling like exhaust fumes and other people's cologne. But the tips weren't bad, and more importantly, I was learning things. See, here's what rich people don't understand about service workers. We're invisible to them, but we see everything. They talk around us like we're not even there. And the Blackwoods? They talked about business, money, and how much they enjoyed destroying people's lives. The first time I saw Olivia after losing my restaurant, I almost walked off the job. It was a Friday night, maybe 3 weeks after I'd started, and she glided up to the valet stand like she owned the sidewalk. Same arrogant walk, same dead eyes, same way of looking through people instead of at them. She handed me her keys, Mercedes AMG, license plate Olivia 1 because subtlety wasn't her strong suit. And I realized she had absolutely no idea who I was. To her, I was just another uniform. Another faceless worker bee in her perfect little world. "Be careful with the paint," she said, not even glancing at my face. Last valet scratched it. I wanted to say something. Wanted to grab her by the shoulders and scream, "You destroyed my life!" But I just nodded and took the keys like a good little employee. That's when I started planning. The thing about working valet is you hear everything. Rich people in restaurants talk like the staff doesn't have ears. Over the next few months, I learned that Spencer's company was leveraged up to its eyeballs. Learned that the Metropolitan was hemorrhaging money on bad investments. Learned that Olivia spent more on handbags than most people made in a year and thought she was a business genius because she married rich. I also learned they were creatures of habit. Same table every Friday, same orders, same routine of treating the staff like garbage. Bryce was the worst. Kid would roll up into that Lamborghini, music blasting, and toss his keys at whoever was working valet like we were trained dogs. He'd gotten into the habit of filming us for his TikTok account, making videos about people who peaked in high school and why you should stay in school, kids. Real original stuff. His sister Paige wasn't much better. 23 years old, Instagram influencer with 50,000 followers who thought that made her famous. She'd post pictures of her food with captions like, "When the help actually gets your order right," and surrounded by people who will never understand real success. But it was Olivia who really got under my skin. Every interaction was designed to remind you of your place in the food chain. She'd snap her fingers when she wanted her car. Never said please or thank you. Had this way of looking at you like you were something unpleasant she'd stepped in. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in November. I was working a double shift because one of the other guys called in sick, and I'd been on my feet for 14 hours straight. My lower back was killing me, my feet were swollen, and I was counting the minutes until I could go home to my studio apartment and collapse. Olivia came out of the restaurant around 11 p.m., clearly drunk from whatever charity event they'd been hosting inside. She was with two other women, both wearing enough jewelry to fund a small country, laughing about something that probably wasn't funny. "Where's my car?" she demanded, weaving slightly on her designer heels. "I'll get it right away, ma'am," I said, already heading toward the garage. "Wait," she called after me. "Aren't you the same valet who was here last week? The one who parked my car crooked?" I stopped. "I don't think so, ma'am." She walked closer, studying my face with the intense focus that drunk people think makes them look smart. "You look familiar. Have we met?" For a second I thought she'd figured it out, that she'd recognized the restaurant owner she'd destroyed. Part of me wanted her to remember, wanted to see the shock in her eyes. But then she laughed. "Oh, I know. You all look the same to me. Same desperate expression, same defeated posture." She turned to her friends. "Isn't it sad? Men his age working jobs meant for teenagers?" Her friends tittered like wind chimes in a breeze. "I mean, what kind of life choices do you have to make to end up here?" Olivia continued, gesturing at me like I was an exhibit in a zoo. "Standing in the rain, parking other people's cars? At his age?" I stood there holding her keys, rain starting to fall, watching her destroy what was left of my dignity for the entertainment of her friends. The same woman who'd cost me my business, my house, my pride, was now mocking me for the job I'd been forced to take because of her. That's when I decided being invisible had its advantages. Because invisible people can do invisible things. I started making phone calls that night, not to business contacts. Those bridges were burned to ash. I called my old Marine buddies, the ones who'd done well for themselves after getting out. Guys who understood that sometimes you have to fight dirty to win clean. First call was to Rodriguez, who'd gone into construction after his second tour. He knew every building inspector in the city, every code enforcement officer, every guy with a clipboard and the power to shut places down. "Heath, brother, what do you need?" Rodriguez asked when I explained what I was looking for. "Information," I said, "about a place called the Metropolitan Steakhouse. Building violations, permit issues, anything that might be sitting in some file somewhere." "Give me a week," he said. "And Heath, whatever they did to you, I'm sorry, man. Nobody should lose their business like that." Second call was to Williams, who'd gotten into real estate development after leaving the Corps. He understood property law, shell companies, and how to move money around without leaving fingerprints. "You want to buy what?" Williams asked when I laid out my crazy idea. "The building, the debt, the whole operation." But quietly. Williams was quiet for a long time. "That's going to take serious money, Heath. We're talking millions." "I know. That's why I need your help." The plan was simple in theory, complicated as hell in practice. Buy the debt that the Metropolitan was drowning in, then use that leverage to take control of the building. But simple doesn't mean easy, and it definitely doesn't mean cheap. I spent every penny I made parking cars. Lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. Slept on an air mattress because I'd sold my bed for cash. My electric bill was 3 months behind, my phone was about to get cut off, and I wore the same 3 shirts to work because they were all I had left. Sarah called one Tuesday night while I was counting change for laundry money. "Emma's worried about you," she said. "She tried calling last week, but your phone went to voicemail." "Phone company and I are having a disagreement about payment schedules," I said, trying to keep it light. "Heath, this has to stop. You're killing yourself over something that's already done. Accept it and move on, like it was that simple. Like losing everything you'd worked for was just another life lesson to file away and forget about." "I'm fine, Sarah. Just going through a rough patch." "You're parking cars, Heath. You used to own a restaurant. Don't you think it's time to admit this isn't working?" After I hung up, I sat in my empty studio apartment and seriously considered quitting. Just walking away from the whole thing, finding a different job in a different city, starting over somewhere the Blackwoods couldn't find me. But then I remembered Olivia's laugh, the way she'd looked at me like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe, the casual cruelty of destroying someone's life for sport. I picked up the phone and called Rodriguez back. "Found something interesting," he said without preamble. "Your Metropolitan Steakhouse. Building's got problems. Fire suppression system's outdated, electrical work that doesn't meet current code, and the kitchen ventilation system's been jerry-rigged so many times it looks like a Rube Goldberg machine. How bad? Bad enough to shut them down if the right inspector took a close look." And I know the right inspector. Williams had been busy too. Turns out the Metropolitan's parent company was bleeding money faster than they could borrow it. Overextended in Las Vegas, leveraged to the hilt on properties that were worth half what they'd paid for them. The debt's for sale, Williams told me over coffee in a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. But we're talking $2.8 million, Heath. Where are you going to get that kind of money? That's when I made the call I'd been dreading. To my old business partner from before I went solo, a guy named Patterson who'd made a fortune in tech after selling his restaurant interests. Heath Morrison, Patterson said when he picked up, heard you got your ass handed to you by some CEO's wife. That's got to sting. It stings, I admitted. But I've got a business proposition for you. I laid it out. The debt purchase, the building acquisition, the plan to turn the Metropolitan into something better. I didn't mention the revenge angle. Patterson was a businessman, not a therapist. So you want me to front you $2.8 million to buy a failing restaurant so you can compete with the people who destroyed your last restaurant? Patterson asked. That's about the size of it. Patterson laughed. You know what, Heath? You've got bigger balls than brains, but I like the play. These Blackwood people sound like the kind of entitled jerks who need a reality check. I'm in for half if you can find the other half. The other half came from an unexpected source. Emma called me 3 days later. Dad, I know things have been tough since the restaurant. I've been thinking about taking a gap year, maybe getting a job instead of going back to school. Absolutely not, I said. Your education comes first. But Dad, I have some money saved up from my summer job and I know you're struggling. Emma, no. I'm not taking your college money. It's not for college anymore, Dad. It's for you. For us. I believe in you. 47 years old, and my 19-year-old daughter was offering to invest her future in mine. It should have made me feel proud. Instead, it made me feel like the biggest failure in Chicago. But it also made me more determined than ever to make this work. By February, we had the money. HM Holdings, Heath Morrison Holdings, officially existed as a Delaware corporation. On paper, it looked like a boring real estate investment trust. In reality, it was my weapon. The Blackwoods had no idea what was coming. They were too busy living their perfect lives, treating people like garbage, secure in the knowledge that money and connections made them untouchable. They were about to learn that sometimes the help fights back. The night everything changed was a cold Friday in March, Chicago winter hanging on like a drunk who won't leave the party. The Metropolitan was packed with the usual crowd of suits and socialites, all pretending their money made them interesting. The Blackwoods were having some kind of celebration dinner. Spencer had just closed another acquisition, buying out some small tech company and probably firing half the employees. They'd reserved the entire back section, invited all their rich friends to watch them pat themselves on the back. I was outside in the Valet station wearing the same red vest I'd been wearing for 18 months, when Bryce pulled up in that damn Lamborghini. He was on his phone, probably editing another TikTok video about loser adults working teenage jobs. He got out and did his usual routine, tossed the keys at me like I was a trained SEAL, not bothering to look at my face. But this time was different. This time I had a folder in my jacket pocket containing the deed to the building he was standing on. I caught the keys, same as always. But instead of running off to park his car, I just stood there. "What are you waiting for?" Bryce asked, finally looking at me. "Just thinking," I said. "About what? It's not complicated. Take car, park car, bring back ticket. Even you should be able to handle that." That's when Olivia came storming out of the restaurant. She'd heard us talking and came to see what was taking so long. Behind her was Spencer, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and Paige with her phone out, probably filming for Instagram. "What is the holdup?" Olivia demanded. "We have guests waiting." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 18 months. Same dead eyes, same entitled smirk, same woman who'd destroyed my life for sport and never thought about it again. "Actually, Mrs. Blackwood," I said, "there seems to be some confusion about who's in charge here." "Excuse me?" She laughed. "Are you having some kind of breakdown? Park the car or we'll have you fired." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder. Legal documents, thick paper, official seals. The kind of paperwork that changes everything. "Funny thing about that," I said, opening the folder. "As of this morning, HM Holdings is the new owner of this building. Previous ownership company defaulted on their loans. We bought the debt." Spencer stepped forward, squinting at the papers. This is impossible. We have contracts, agreements. Had contracts, I corrected. With the old owners, new ownership, new rules. Olivia was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're just valet staff, she said, but her voice was shaking. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the banking app, I'm your new landlord. And Mrs. Blackwood, your family is no longer welcome on my property. The look on her face was worth every frozen night I'd spent parking cars, worth every ramen noodle dinner, worth every humiliation she'd put me through. It was the look of someone realizing the world wasn't as fixed as they thought. This is illegal, Spencer blustered, but he was already backing toward the door. I'll call my lawyers. Go ahead, I said, but you might want to check your city permits first. Building code violations, fire safety issues, liquor license irregularities. Amazing what gets discovered when the right people take a close look. Other valets had gathered around, along with restaurant staff who'd come out to see what the commotion was about. Nicole, the hostess who'd been there 15 years, was grinning like Christmas morning. Mr. Morrison? She asked. Is this for real? Real as the rain, I said. And effective immediately, the Blackwood family is banned from the premises. That's when it hit Olivia. Not just that she was being kicked out, but who was kicking her out. Morrison, she whispered. Morrison's prime. You're that restaurant owner. The one whose business you destroyed? Yeah, that's me. Her face went through a whole range of emotions. Shock, recognition, fear, and finally, pure rage. You can't do this to us, she screamed. We're important people. We have influence. Had influence, I said. Past tense. Logan? Logan, head of security and another ex-Marine, stepped forward. We'd been talking about this moment for months. Want me to escort them off the property, boss? He asked, putting emphasis on that last word. Please, I said, through the kitchen exit. I don't want them disturbing the other customers. As security moved in, Olivia turned back to me one last time. Her makeup was running, her perfect hair was messed up, and she looked smaller somehow. This isn't over, she hissed. Yeah, it is, I said. Check your privilege at the door, ma'am. You're dismissed. They were escorted out the back way, past the dish pit and the dumpsters, the same route they'd forced me to take when they destroyed my life. The crowd that had gathered started clapping. Slow at first, then building to real applause. These were working people who'd been putting up with the Blackwoods' abuse for years, and they were finally seeing justice. I stood there in the rain for a minute, watching their taillights disappear. 20 months of planning, $380,000 in losses, and more humiliation than any man should have to swallow. But I wasn't that broken down valet anymore. I was standing in front of a $2.8 million building that I owned, wearing a uniform I'd never have to wear again. The next morning, I called a staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the main dining room, nervous and excited. Nobody's getting fired, I said right off the bat. We're expanding, not cutting. The relief was immediate. We're also implementing some changes. Better wages, better benefits, and a new policy. We treat people with respect. That goes for everyone, staff and customers. 6 months later, the Metropolitan was thriving under new management. Better working conditions, happy staff, and a zero-tolerance policy for customer abuse made all the difference. The Blackwoods tried to fight it through lawyers and city connections, but their reputation for treating working people like garbage preceded them everywhere they went. Sometimes justice takes its time, but when it finally arrives, it's worth the wait. The keys to success aren't the ones that get thrown at you. They're the ones you forge yourself. 6 months later, I got a call from Emma. She was back at school using the money I'd paid back to her plus interest. Dad, I saw the article about the Metropolitan in Chicago magazine. They called you a restaurant industry comeback story. I laughed, standing in my new office overlooking the dining room. Fancy way of saying I got lucky. No, Dad, you got even. There's a difference. That night, I walked through the restaurant after closing. Same tables where the Blackwoods used to hold court, but different energy. Nicole, now my assistant manager, had left a note on my desk. Boss, the new hire, Rodriguez's nephew, just out of the army, he reminds me of someone I used to know. Good people. I kept that red valet vest framed on the wall behind my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Some guys my age talk about their glory days, the good old times when everything was easier. I prefer to think my best days are still ahead. Those keys Bryce threw at me that night, I still have them. Never did park that Lamborghini. Some things are more satisfying when you just let them sit right where they fell.